Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
All right. So today we're going to talk about a new film by first-time writer-director Maggie Gyllenhaal. Ever heard of her? It's called The Lost Daughter. It's on Netflix. And a quick synopsis. While on vacation in Greece, a language professor, played by Olivia Coleman, encounters another family, specifically a mother and her child. And this brings up unresolved feelings from the professor's past. So this has a lot of heavy hitters in it. And you got Olivia Coleman, you got Dakota Johnson, Jesse Buckley, all three of which we have just heaped huge amounts of praise on throughout the... How many years have we been doing this?
Almost 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, through all of those years, we've explicitly singled out each of these actors and just gushed about them. So I thought it was really cool that they were all going to be in a single film. Now, Olivia Coleman and Jesse Buckley play the same character, just at different points in time in that character's life. So they don't necessarily get to interact. But I could see why, just after the first like 5 minutes, I was like, oh, this is definitely a Paul movie, because it is heavy on the acting. But I think at the same time, Maggie Gyllenhaal, who is an actor, knows that it seems like she knows how to give these actors space and allow them to bring something of themselves to it. And there were a lot of choices that were made that I thought were unique, and then also things that I wouldn't have thought about, but that's why I'm not a professional actor. So how did you like it? How did it affect you?
Deeply.
That's a better question.
That is a better question, because how did I like it? That's a perplexing question, because I'm not sure I did like it.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing. Anything that I say that might sound like not a compliment, it is a compliment. It's so complex and so rich and so interestingly opposite of what I was expecting, or wasn't even, I don't even know if I had expectations. I just, and we can talk about more scenes later on, but I'll go right to one scene. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's on Netflix. It's one of those ones that I'm wondering if I would make it a generalization to recommend it to people, because I'm not sure how people will understand it or take it. I think I need to know the person I'm recommending it to and see if they are able to understand it. And if they are, that's great, because I need help understanding it on some level, because I have a lot of questions. That's not a negative. That's actually a positive, because I have so many thoughts about it and I don't know what's what in this movie, and that's good. I am perplexed by it in the best way. So immediately when you meet Olivia Coleman, you think you're in for something different than what you get. And I even saw Olivia Coleman's 4-part miniseries on HBO called Landscapers. Have you heard about that?
No.
Well, it's based on a true story, and it's about a husband and wife who murdered her parents, right? You hear about that at the very beginning of the film, and they're in jail for 25 years. And even after that, I was like, I would like to hang out with Olivia Coleman. I'm not so sure I want to hang out with that character and what she did, but at the end of it, you kind of feel sympathetic to it. And, I saw her in Fleabag, and she's not the most pleasant person in Fleabag, but I still want to hang out with her. After this, I'm thinking to myself, there's a side to Olivia Coleman I've never seen before, and it's The Lost Daughter. Everything you think you're supposed to know about this film, the reverse happens. And the example I'll use is in the very beginning of the film, she goes to the beach and has a really pleasant day, and it's all her own beach, and it's all, just a really great day. Then the next day she comes to the beach and she's hanging out and she gets all comfortable and she has her spot. And then all of a sudden, Dakota Johnson and her family shows up, and they're loud, and they're
all 30 of them.
Yeah, there's a ton of them, and they're loud, and they're just having a good time, and they get in front of her. And then Dakota Johnson's sister-in-law, if I'm not mistaken, if that's correct, comes up to Olivia Coleman and says, oh, do you mind? Can you just move? Because, we need this space for our family. And you're expecting Olivia Coleman to sweetly say, sure, no problem. But she doesn't. She says, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. And the way that she handles it and the dialogue that Maggie Gyllenhaal wrote for her is nothing I was expecting from a character in a movie to do. Because why should she move? Why is it always expected for that character to move? And in every other movie I've ever seen, that character moves. And then disgruntledly, underneath her breath, yells and screams about how they bothered her all day long because she had to move. Well, why not? Let's explore the idea of having that character not move. And it says so much about that character in just one scene. And the rest of the movie does that over and over again. What you're expecting this character to do, she does not the opposite, just not what you're expecting anybody in her position to do. And I found that fascinating. It's a look at motherhood I don't think I've seen on film before. It's a look at, some of the tropes are similar to things we've seen on film. What is the lead character's name? Because I can never pronounce it. Is it Leda? L-E-D-A?
Yeah, I think it's like Leda.
Leda? I'm going to go with Leda. If I'm incorrect, I beg your pardon. No disrespect. When you see young Leda, the trope of her going off and doing something outside of her marriage, and spoilers from this point on, if you haven't seen this film, it's in the trailer. It's not anything you're not expecting. When you see what happens to her storyline, we've seen that trope before. We've seen that storyline before. But the way that young Leda reacts to it and responds to it is different than I've ever seen before. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be taking from this movie, but I have not stopped thinking about it since I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's something that Michael Haneke does a lot in taking all of the experiences that we've had with characters in films before, and understanding that every moviegoer is coming to this film with their own preconceived notions of what a main character in a movie does and what a main character in a movie is. And if a particular character is identified as a mother in a film, then we have these preconceived notions of what that mother is and what that mother stands for. And in this movie, throughout the film, it pulls that out of you as a moviegoer. And every time for me, we got to a point, especially in the flashbacks, where the Leda character has a decision to make or is experiencing something that has to do either with her kids or without her kids. You expect her to quote unquote do the right thing, and she doesn't. And you keep saying, yeah, well, but okay, extenuating circumstances. All right, she's stressed, all these things. Maybe her husband didn't give her opportunities to do her studies while he was doing his. You start going through the film and being like, here's an excuse, here's an excuse, here's an excuse. And you've already said spoilers. So we don't have to talk about the end necessarily right now, but ultimately by the end, you realize that she is not the quote unquote mother that is in most films. And so that it's like, for me, I was fighting against those urges to say like, well, maybe she just doesn't care, or maybe it's not that she doesn't care. She puts herself first always. And she ultimately says that at the end, essentially, she's not a mother. It's just the way that she is mothering her children is not what you would expect in a film. And so that, I think, is an interesting thing to dig into as a filmmaker, as a screenwriter. And this was a novel by Elena Ferrante, who is an Italian novelist. And so she obviously dug into that too, who, I didn't know this, but she is anonymous. Like, no, it's a pseudonym. Elena Ferrante is not her real name. So nobody knows who she is. So that's interesting. And she's a mother, probably. You assume that she's a mother, but maybe she's not. So like that whole thing, it just adds another layer of complexity onto it. So yeah, I mean,
she's been a daughter at some point in her life. She's been a daughter,
exactly.
So that's a given. You know what just struck me when you were saying that, because you're saying the exact same thing I'm saying, probably in a more intelligent way, but that's a given. But if a man did the thing. Short. I know, you're right. I got the passion. Sorry, I almost started singing West Side Story and I stopped. I've been bugging Josh at the beginning of this podcast singing West Side Story, and I cannot sing, and I'm obsessed with this movie. So anyway, that's a whole nother podcast. It's coming. If a man did anything that Leda did in this film, no one would think twice, and it would be a boring movie because we've seen men do this 1,000 times. There would be no question that a man would put himself first. There would be no question that a man would say, nobody would walk up to a man and say, can you move? And if a man said, no, they would be, okay, yeah, you're right.
Ed
sure.
Harris is that example. He is it.
You're exactly right. Actually, Ed Harris is sort of more traditionally a female character in a movie like this. In previous other films, he's much more nurturing, he's much more giving, he's much more understanding. And actually that weird, when she like is sitting there thinking she's going to go over and hit on him or whatever, and then she walks up to him and what is that? What is it? What is it? See, Olivia Coleman, if that's who she's like in real life, I don't want to hang out with her because I don't understand. Like, I don't understand who that is. But isn't that what men do in movies all the time? They do stupid stuff in front of women all the time to try to impress them. And the difference between men and women in this film is that most men think they got away with it and they still think they're cool. She knows something didn't work right at that moment. So she's much smarter than most men in these situations. So the fact that we're even questioning what we thought a mother should do based on what we've seen mothers do in films is an issue. And I think that's what Maggie Gyllenhaal, well, from my perspective, that's partially what Maggie Gyllenhaal wanted to explore. And I like the fact that I wasn't standing in judgment of Leda, and I wasn't standing in judgment of her younger in the flashback sequences, because, and speaking of the opposite, what Jessie Buckley does in this is the opposite of what most actors would do. And maybe it's because it's written that way, but do you remember the scene where, I can't remember if she's getting ready to go out of town and she's trying to get the kids ready or whatever, and she turns to him and she basically says, I'm stressing out, like I'm freaking out, but she doesn't. She says it in this calm kind of like, oh, I'm freaking out, I'm stressing out, and she underplays it. And it's the opposite of how those moments would be played in any other movie when it comes to a mother, because a mother can't possibly be quietly freaking out. She would have to be over the top and emotional and exaggerated. It couldn't possibly be that she was just realistically saying to him, you're not doing anything. Help me out. I'm gonna freak out. And she says it almost calmly, to the point where if her man was listening and in tune to who she was, he would have stopped everything and known that that was an indication that she really was losing her mind. But he never considers that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of kind of like signpost scenes in the movie, and I mean, they could be considered not tropes, but they could be considered heavy-handed, and I think that they don't come off that way. There's a scene in the middle of the film in one of the flashbacks where Jessie Buckley as Leda and her husband, they take in a couple of hikers, and I thought that was a really effective scene because it's the first time in the film that we really get to see her and what she does in her life, like what she has been studying, because we don't necessarily see that until that scene where she starts reciting poetry in Italian, and then she gets to, you know, she kind of confronts the elephant in the room of like, oh, hey, so you were already married before, you had kids, and then he's like, yeah, I couldn't be with them, had to leave. And then that is something that I don't know if it necessarily unlocked anything in her, but it showed her that this is a thing, I guess, that I'm seeing this person that is doing this, like, and that is unabashed about this. And so that is, instead of her retreating back into the trope of motherhood in films, like this character goes the other way. It unlocks that thing in her that is her wanting to push forward with her life, even though she's part of a family that has a life. And you know, now she's obviously reckoning with that. So Dakota Johnson, she's kind of playing a type, obviously, and she didn't have a lot to do in the film, but I felt like she was effective because she's kind of playing frazzled, tired. That's what she's playing. But especially at the beginning, when you see how her daughter is lost, and then Leda finds her daughter and then, you know, brings her back to her. And then there's somewhat of a connection there between the two, but Did you get like a feeling of suspicion?
There is a scene where Olivia Coleman is caught by Dakota Johnson staring off at everybody. And Leda has done that a few times in the film, analyzing what looks like she's looking at her bathing suit and her clothing and the nails and the makeup and all that other stuff. And I'm not sure it's that superficial. Maybe she's taking in way more stuff. And I don't think it's a judgment. I think she's just taking her in. And I don't know. This is one of the hardest characters to read, Leda. So I'm not sure. But then there's that moment a little bit later on, I think it's right after she finds her daughter, where Olivia Coleman, and she's not caught, she just notices that Dakota Johnson is noticing her or is looking at her. But I also can't read that either, because in any other movie, the cliche would be, oh, look, it's a middle-aged woman and she's gotten through her life. She doesn't have to deal with this screaming kid anymore and this lost doll. I want to be her, and do that, Freaky Friday thing where they want to switch, where, oh, look, she's young and she's beautiful and she can wear these strap things around her body and not look like she's, in a net caught, and she looks perfect in this bathing suit that should not look as perfect on a person. Maybe I want to be her again. That would be the cliche. None of that reads like that in this film. I don't know if it was suspicion, or maybe it was. Maybe I'm not realizing it was. But based on how Dakota Johnson's character, and we should get her name as a character
Nina.
instead of, is it Nina?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Maggie Gyllenhaal changed a lot of where it takes place and where the lead character works and that kind of stuff for the movie, which is undefined but defined. It's bizarre, because she said she works
go ahead. In Boston, Cambridge. She works at a university, so probably Harvard. That's in Cambridge.
Right, but that's my point, though. Point. It's not Harvard. It's probably Harvard.
Yeah.
It's defined as Cambridge, Boston professor, but never Harvard.
Yeah.
I found that intriguing. I was like, why don't you say Harvard if it's Harvard? And if it's not Harvard, where the hell would it be? Where would it be?
It's
so anyway,
Cambridge Community College.
Hey, man, I'd go there just to say I went there.
There you go.
I went to community college for a year. I loved it. It was one of my best years of college, Nina. So I'm not exactly sure I understand the motivations of these characters, but I'm not exactly sure that's the question that Maggie Gyllenhaal is posing. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Is it suspicion? I don't think so, because the way that Nina reacts to the end scenario at the end, if she was already suspicious of Leda to begin with, then she wouldn't have had that subtle reaction to, I know you saw me with that guy. She just kind of haphazardly says it, don't judge me, but I know you saw me. And actually, she doesn't feel judged by Leda, and she doesn't feel like she needs to explain why she's done what she's done, which is opposite of what you normally see in movies. Normally, it's this big judgment thing. Oh, you're judging me because I'm a slut, blah, 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 blah. None of that happens in this film. So no, I don't think it's suspicion. I don't know what it is.
I think we're kind of, there's a piece of this film that we're neglecting, and I think it's the Callie character played by Dagmara Dominich, the sister-in-law. And she has a few lines, not very many lines, but her lines are very pointed. Like, one of the lines that you just made me remember when we were talking about that is that, she says, oh, you're on vacation. Where's your family? Yeah. And then she's like, oh, you're not with your family. And so, Dakota Johnson's character, Nina, is right next to her at that point in time. And so maybe that's something that she clocks and is like, okay, so she's obviously off on her own, not with her family.
By the way, no man in any movie on vacation by himself would ever be asked, where's your family? And if they asked that question, it would never be assumed that they should be with their family. He could be single, he could be divorced, he could be a widow. They would have every rationalization in the book for why he's there by himself. He's had enough. His wife is a pain in the ass. His kids are...
Or he's on a business trip or something.
Or he's on a business trip, or he's won something, or he just needs to get time away from his family. Everybody would be okay with that. No one would question it. The fact that she gets questioned, that is exactly what I'm talking about, and the motif of this podcast for me. And I once again felt like, is this woman going to spend this whole vacation like wanting to relax and wanting to smell the breeze and feel the ocean. And everybody is going to give her a hard time about that, because that's what continuously happens over and over and over again throughout this whole entire film to her.
Yeah.
When she's
the lighthouse, the lighthouse and the foghorn,
that was one of the I said,
cicada.
you know what? That's the very first thing I thought is, this is exactly what would happen to me. I would finally have enough money to find this vacation and afford this vacation and walk into this beautiful room and be like, okay. And then, wah, that would so happen to me, and I would just have to deal with it. And you just have to deal with that. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be.
At the same time, the solution was there in front of her the whole time. Ed Harris showed her how to use the air conditioning, and he showed her how to close the windows and said, you know, if you close these windows, then you won't have to, all of these things can be taken care of. But that's not what she wanted. And that is not the thing that may be the thing that most people will do, but that's not the thing that she did and something she wanted to do.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. She wants the fresh air. She doesn't want the air conditioning. She probably lives in air conditioning. She doesn't. Some people don't like air conditioning.
So if you want the fresh air, you get a cicada on your pillow every once in a while. Oh, move on.
Well, I'm from Virginia, so they mean nothing to me. I used to play with them as a kid. They mean nothing to me. They're neat to me. I wouldn't want to wake up next to one, but
yeah, I know, right? So once we find out that she has actually taken the doll, I think that her taking the doll, first of all, it's very confusing. And I initially thought that like that the sister-in-law planted the doll in her bag, and she was just like weirded out about like how to give it back to them. But then I, quickly realized that like she did take the doll. And I think that that's kind of twofold. Number one, she just wanted to have the doll. There you go. For some reason, she wanted to have the doll. But number two, she wanted to try to push Dakota Johnson's character into a state of having to deal with this child who's not happy. Now, maybe she didn't know how extreme it was going to be. Maybe she didn't know that Nina's daughter wouldn't sleep, and that, Nina's daughter would, whatever, that she was just going to make Nina's life a complete living hell. But that's what happened. And at any moment she could have fixed that. She could have helped that. She could have solved that issue. But then instead, Nina just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and not sleeping and all that stuff. And her decisions are her own. But then her getting involved with what's the guy name? Her getting involved with Will.
Paul Pascal.
Is there any way that, that she's pushing, she as in Leda is pushing Nina in some sort of way towards a breaking point, or towards what could be considered a breaking point? I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how malevolent Leda is in this film. I think that she's mostly just self-interested, and in seeing Nina, maybe she's trying to be the hiker to Nina that she had. She's trying to play the same role as the hikers did to her, and be like, this is a possibility. That's a theory of mine.
Well, what I find interesting is that I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong, and I'm not saying you're right and I'm wrong, or vice versa. I don't think it's a matter of right or wrong. I think it's a matter of emotions and what we felt when we watched the movie. So maybe you're right. Maybe this is right up my alley, and the acting is superb and mind-blowing on so many levels. So maybe I'm connecting to it on a different level. But I love how you think that, and this sounds like an accusation, but it's not. I love how you kind of need to attach blame to somebody. So now the sister-in-law is blamed for everything that possibly is unnerving in the beginning of the film, but maybe just bad, small little uncomfortable things happen to people all the time. I'm telling you, I would walk into that room and that lighthouse would do that.
Sure.
Now, I would have no problem with an air conditioning, but that's just some things in life are irritants to people, and they're not life altering, but they're irritants. And maybe just these are the irritants of life, but you're attaching it to a human being who has an intention. I find that fascinating because one, I didn't see it that way. And two, why are we blaming somebody else for somebody else's issues in life? And also, you said something about her motivation for the doll. And I've been thinking about this over and over and over again. I need to attach something to it because it's bothering the hell out of me why she does what she does. But maybe, spoilers, it is exactly what she says at the end. I don't know. I don't know why I did this. Because I think that what's more interesting is not necessarily why she took the doll or that she's trying to set up Nina to be a different person or give her the option that the hitchhikers gave her, which, by the way, did not fly into my attention until you just mentioned it again. Like, I heard her say that, but I didn't see that as a motivation for young Leda to do what she did later on. I saw Peter Skarsgård as the motivation for why she would see some other life outside of her daughters. I didn't see that hiker as the major influence to that, which is odd. That whole sequence is odd. Like, they don't know those people.
No.
It's just odd in the best way. So anyway, maybe what she does with the doll is more important than why she took it or why she even gave it back. Maybe not being your cliche nurturer as a mother, because she's not on any level from what we've seen in the film. Maybe that's how she feels like she's giving back to this young girl who's not getting it from her mother or not getting it from, because I don't think that Leda would say she related to Nina. Nina's got money. Nina comes from influence. They're bad people. They do bad things. They have a lot of power in the world that they live in. You know, that speaks to her asking her to move again. She's never thinking twice that she won't move, because people move when we ask them to move, when we tell them to move.
Don't you know who we are? That kind of a thing. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. So what she does with the doll is the only thing I can almost figure out, and why. Because why she takes it, I don't know. But once again, it bodes well for the motif that I keep bringing up. It's the polar opposite of what you're expecting her to do. You're expecting her to find it and give it back so the girl stops screaming. But she doesn't do that. She nurtures that baby doll more than you see her nurture her own kids, or Nina, or the young child, Nina's daughter, or anybody else in the film. Ed Harris, any of them.
Okay. A couple things. Number one, you talked about my views on like why I have to have a reason for certain things, especially in the beginning of the film. And I think that, we talk about this all the time in that there is film real estate. Maggie Gyllenhaal has my attention for 2 hours. What is she going to do with it? She can only do so much in those 2 hours. She can only show me so many things in those 2 hours. And a good filmmaker is going to show you really important things as much as possible. There's not going to be just, like 5 minutes of staring at a black wall for no reason. So the things that she did add into this film, and obviously she's also taking a whole novel and picking out the things that she wants and changing the things that she wants and making it her own out of a previous text. So she's constructing her own narrative and her own structure. It's like she's building a building out of this source material. She's taking the raw materials and she's building her own building. So if things don't fit together in that building, then it's not gonna stand. That's why I look at something like either this has to play upon this or that has to lead to that. And otherwise it's just sloppy filmmaking. And I've seen enough craft in this film and enough craft from Maggie Gyllenhaal and all the people that have helped her make this film that I think that there's a little bit more to it than I may be able to glean from the first watching. So, that's why I'm trying to scrape at certain things and bring up certain things that I was confused about or that I was trying to figure out where they fit, because the hiker scene specifically, you're right. You could have the whole movie without that, and it could, and Leda could still do exactly the same things that she does, and the movie would still push forward, and the end would still be the end, and all the relationships would still be the same. That's still plausible, but because they just kind of pressed pause on the whole film and added this vignette of having these two hikers come in, like that's gotta be super important. And I think that the most important part of that whole scene is, we talked about it earlier, where she said, she asked him like, oh, did you have a family? And he's, yeah, I've got 2 kids and they're with their mom. And then they keep talking and have fun and recite poetry and all that stuff. And then right as they're leaving, she asks his girlfriend, how are his daughters? How are they doing? And she's like, he doesn't have daughters. He has sons. So Jessie Buckley's Leda has already put herself into that hiker's position. She assumed that he had daughters because she has daughters. She's thinking of herself in the future and being like, how would my daughters be affected if I left? So that, I think that line right there, how are his daughters, is the reason for that whole scene. Instead of looking at it from as a dispassionate third party observer, she's already being that person in her mind. She's already done it. So that's what I got from that scene. And I think it's a crucial scene.
I agree with you 100%. But I also think that it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that, a man talking about leaving his 2 kids behind, I don't think plants that idea per se in her head, but are we supposed to now, okay, we're supposed to just accept him saying that and be okay with it. And then of course, you make a very good point. I agree with you. I think that you're right. She projects herself onto it. Are we now as an audience member not supposed to judge later on when we find out that she does the exact same thing? Because we weren't judging him. You know what I mean? We weren't saying, oh, he's a bad father.
How are we not judging? You're assuming that we weren't judging him. I mean,
I didn't judge him.
Well, I mean, sucks for his kids, but
but you don't know the circumstances behind that. You know what I mean?
True.
Like when somebody leaves their kids for a good reason, to like whatever that may be, then, some people have to move to other countries to make money for their family, and they're not with their kids. They had to leave their kids. There was a reason why they left their kids, and their kids are doing fine with whoever stayed back, but they had to make money. They had to go to some opportunity that they didn't have in the country that they lived in, and nobody judges them for that. I just find it interesting that it never sparked my ears. I never thought twice about that he left his kids. And I didn't assume he left them on bad terms when he says it. I didn't think that he just walked away for the love of this woman or whoever. I just assumed there was something going on in his life where he had to be away from his kids for a while. But later on, when you find out she wants to leave her kids, there is this twinge of wanting to judge her and to say she's a bad mother because she just wants to leave her kids. But men do it all the time. No, and I'm not saying that you're absolutely right. Film real estate, you're absolutely right. She built a building and everything is purposeful. I agree. But maybe the opposite happened. Maybe there was already a building and Maggie Gyllenhaal decided to take things away from it to show us what the story was. And maybe I'm not looking at it correctly. So I'm not saying that don't get me wrong. I don't mean to put you on the defense. I have a tendency to be adversarial in my approach to things. And that's not it. It's about passion for me. It's not about saying you're wrong, defend your way. That's not it. But there's something here in this movie that makes me think I'm supposed to think a whole different way about it. You know what I mean? Like I'm not supposed to have any kind of normal thoughts about this film, whatever that means. It's just, it's so perplexing, this film. So I don't know if I made sense of it. I don't want you to be defensive. I think what you're saying, I see why you're trying to connect it.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm wondering if that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Or am I supposed to just have a visceral reaction? Like when Will, the young guy, is out with Olivia Coleman, he's obviously flirting with her. At least you think he is, but you're like, wait, is he? And she's not really responding. Are they really kind of, and you're thinking, this is where it dawned on me. If the opposite was true, and that was a middle-aged man and a young woman, no one would have thought twice about it. No one would have thought twice about it. But because she's a middle-aged woman, he's a younger guy, as an audience member, you go, this is unusual to what I'm used to seeing. Not uncomfortable, just unusual. And that's kind of good to see something different, because why not? Olivia Coleman's a very, very sexy woman. Why not?
Yeah.
And then you're wondering,
I didn't think twice about their.
Well, that's because you have an open mind and you're a good spirit. But most people would be like, ew, because people are just judgmental when it comes to things like that. Because when a man does it, depending on how much older he is than the woman, because it gets gross after a period of time for most people, they don't call him a cougar and they don't have terms for him. You know, is there a term for a middle-aged man who's dating a 20-year-old woman?
A silver fox? I don't know. Is that a thing?
But isn't that a positive term? Doesn't that sound kind of sexy and kind of like, yeah,
I guess, yeah.
And when you get older and you start having gray hair like me, you're like, thank gosh, they're saying silver fox to me. You know, they're not saying, oh, dude, what's going on with you? You know, like dude. They're saying, yeah, right. God, he got old, you know. But then for me, I'm having this instinct, like, is he flirting with her? And then he says something that's overtly flirtatious in tone when he says, well, you're a very beautiful woman. He might even say sexy. I can't remember what he says. And then you're like, oh, okay. So what I was feeling in the beginning of the scene is actually happening. Now, why? Now, why am I watching this? What does this have to do with the second floor of the building that she's created? What does it have to do? And I'm not sure if I just don't have the artistic intellect to put it together yet. Maybe not verbally, but I know how I felt. I felt like, good for her. If she does go to sleep with this guy, good for her. I hope she does. They're both sexy. I hope they have a great time. But it doesn't come to fruition.
Maybe that, I mean, that kind of brings me to my last theory about all this whole thing. Maybe that is meant to point out that's not what she's missing. She's not missing a relationship with a 20-year-old guy. She's missing a relationship with her children. And so there's all kinds of things we can do to explain the title. And the title can mean a lot of stuff. The lost daughter is obviously Dakota Johnson's daughter who gets lost. But it's also the baby doll, because the baby doll, it could be considered her lost daughter, you know, a daughter that she's had that she is now, you know, you're shaking your head. Okay, here we go.
No, I have my own theory about this.
Okay. But then,
and when I saw it on your list, on your notes, I was like, good question. This is a good question.
But then also the lost daughter could be her too. It could be Leda. She could have, because she obviously came from a really tough household, because when her husband, in a flashback, when her husband says, you know, if you leave, I'm taking the kids and I'm taking them to your mother. And she's like, don't take them there. That's where I came from. And that's why I'm all messed up. She obviously doesn't have a very good, well, we can glean that she doesn't have a very good relationship with her mother. So she could be the lost daughter. So all of these things, you know, the baby doll being a representation of a daughter that she is now able to take care of, and that doesn't talk back and doesn't take up her time when she doesn't want to take up her time and all that stuff. But then the very few times that she does interact with her children in the present day, when she's on the phone with them, there's one scene where she's talking to her daughter out on the balcony, and she's like, hey, I'm actually on holiday. And her daughter like cuts her off, and she's like, oh, well, okay. And then her daughter's telling her whatever she wants to tell her about. So it's like her daughter is disinterested in her, and she was less interested in her children when they were younger. I'm not going to say disinterested completely all the time or anything like that, but it's the whole like Cats in the Cradle song. It's very, you know, parallels that. It's like, oh, I didn't have time for you when you were growing up, and now you don't have time for me now that I'm older. I think, you know, we're bringing up these kind of what might be considered tangential scenes in this film, but every time it seems like we're able to tie them right back into the center of this building, or whatever metaphor we're on right now.
No, I like the building idea. I'm always, and maybe I'm pushing it too much in my own mind's eye, that I'm looking for something that's not there, because maybe the building is there and she has constructed this building, and I just need to realize it's a building, and that's a door and that's a window, and you need to open the window and turn off the air conditioning, or you need to walk through the door. But for me, it sounds so much more interesting to be in the building and realize I don't need that curtain. Get rid of that curtain. I don't need that air conditioner. Get rid of it, and leave that door open, but shut that door there. You know, so it's, the metaphor works for me on both levels. I definitely think Leda is the lost daughter. I'm convinced. Well, okay, it's hard for me to say convinced when it comes to a movie like this, but that's the only thing that really rings true to me on some level, because you're right. She does have that scene, but the interesting thing about you can't take them to my mother, she's so worried about that, but she's not worried about leaving them. She's worried about where they're, and they end up going there because that's what is stated. I think even before you see that, there's something stated somewhere that they're at her mother's house. So I think she is the lost daughter, and that scene does happen with her daughter on the balcony, and she is disinterested in her, Cats in the Cradle, all that stuff. But at the end of the movie, when she's on the beach, she's having a perfectly normal conversation with her daughter, and they're engaged with each other on the conversation, and they sound like they talk every day, and they have this perfect relationship, and all's well that ends well in that last scene, after she's being basically threatened off the island and basically persecuted and pursued to leave the island by very dangerous people because of thing that she did that she doesn't even understand why she did it. And she's in trouble for something that she didn't even know why she took that baby doll. And obviously the baby doll is way more perplexed than I can think about right now, because something's always coming out of it. Something's always being cleaned from it. There's worms, there's juice, there's sand, there's things, there's seawater always coming. So obviously that's her purging of her past. And maybe that's a therapeutic moment on some kind of level, that she can take care of this inanimate object if she projects her love onto it. But yet, because of her situation, or because of the way she was raised, and she wasn't considered a priority by her mother, that now she metaphorically can do it to the baby doll because she didn't do it to her kids. And that's therapy for her on some level. And she's purging it. That's why you see the worm coming out of the baby's mouth. Mm-hmm. That's why she buys it a whole separate outfit.
Yeah.
Because I was like, when she does that, I thought that's interesting to me, because you've seen movies where like somebody leaves a baby on somebody's doorstep and they fall in love with the baby. And then of course they have to do the right thing at the end of the movie and give the baby back, even though the baby probably is better off, and they've done everything. They've cut the baby's hair, they've bathed it, got new diapers, you know, blah, 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 blah. And they always do the right thing, and the baby always goes back. Or, you know, maybe the baby lives with the person for the rest of their life and they do the right thing. But has it ever been done with the metaphor of a baby doll? Not that I know of. So it was interesting to me. And then at the end of the movie, when she's talking to her daughter on the phone, she seems like such an average, normal, and I use that word on purpose, person who's just having a free-flowing conversation, as if nobody's pursuing her for this weird thing that she did. And she's had the most relaxing holiday she's had in decades. And it just all seems so normal. But none of the cadence or tone or attitude in her voice is there anywhere else in the film. She does not sound that relaxed, for lack of a better term, anywhere else except for the last part of that film. So it is a very, very interesting film. It's made me think and feel in a completely different way. And who knows, because we're two men talking about this, we could be completely off base, but I hope
we should have prefaced this conversation with that.
We know we're guys. They know we're guys, but we're trying, at least for me. And I think you do too, because you have a good spirit about you. I'm trying to realize, and I was pretty proud of myself, that I wasn't judging Leda, and that I didn't judge Nina, and I didn't really understand Nina. But I wasn't saying you're a bad person for the way that you're being tired and cheat and blah, 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 blah. As a matter of fact, she kind of redeems herself, for lack of a better term, at the end, when she does freak out about, why did you take this baby doll? Why did you take this? I've been freaking out. And Leda was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why. And Dakota Johnson's reaction is appropriate.
Yeah, I've got it queued up here.
I need to give you something else too.
What? You found her? Where did you find her?
No, I took her.
Why?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
But I don't understand. Did you think that the doll wasn't good for us?
I was just playing.
Playing? We were all messed up. You saw us.
I'm an unnatural mother.
I'm an unnatural mother.
Ooh.
And then she also says something that I don't think I heard the first time I saw the movie, where she says, I was just playing. She's the lost daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, I would never protest to knowing what, like if I was speaking with Maggie Gyllenhaal, I would just listen and just please let your art flow over me. But I'm determined to believe she's the lost daughter, because that's an odd, and the way Olivia Coleman, the way she plays it, she sounds like a little kid there. She sounds way younger on that line than she ever does. And she sounds convinced this is just the way it was. I don't know why. I was just playing. I'm an unnatural mother. Just facts. No, you figure it out. But like I said, I that's an interesting scene, and Dakota Johnson shines in this movie doing nothing but being there. Like she's just in the scenes sometimes and says little to nothing. And that's hard. It's really hard. And she is something else. One day, people will start to recognize the power of her. And we've talked about that before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Suspiria, we did a whole podcast on her.
Yeah. And we've said it before. You got to do what you got to do to be a working actress. And she's done it. And now it's starting to pay off. And she's doing this interesting stuff. And the fact that Maggie Gyllenhaal, who is an interesting actress, who has been doing interesting stuff and has been acclaimed for it, has saw it in Dakota Johnson. And I'm wondering, when I see a performance like what Dakota Johnson did with Nina, could anybody else have done it like that? People could have done it their way, but could they have done? That scene is played so well. It's toe to toe. It's the best boxing match in the whole film, because who really comes out on top? Because then Dakota Johnson kind of freaks out there, right?
Yeah, and she stabs her.
Yeah. What
so
is
we haven't
movie?
even talked about the beginning of the film, which is, it's not a beat and switch, but it's also just kind of like this is the stakes of this film, you know?
Right.
And turns out like that's like movie stakes, but the real stakes are much more sinister. And it's a hat pin. Yeah, she stabbed her with the hat pin, but turns out she was okay. Like, she's pretty much fine.
The hat pin she gave her.
Exactly.
To solve an issue she was solving. She solved a motherly issue for her.
Yeah, it's Chekhov's hat pin right there. So that's, but still, it's...
I'm changing it to Chekhov's hat pin from now on.
It's something that we expect the stakes to be at a certain level when you lead off your film with someone, you know, crumbling at the beach with blood on their white shirt that ostensibly got stabbed. But once we realize throughout the film that there's a lot at stake, like being stabbed by a hat pin is actually pretty low on the totem pole here compared to other stuff that's going on. You know, some psychological trauma that Nina may be experiencing, and then the journey that Leda is going throughout this whole time. So yeah, the stabbing, it's kind of anticlimactic actually.
And then she sits on the beach like it's no big deal.
Sure.
And talks. But I did have a moment of realization where I was like, you know what? I'm proud of myself that I'm not judging these people. I'm trying to understand. Life is complex. People are complex. Women on film have been underwritten and undermined and not given their due when it comes to being complex human beings. We assume we know what a woman's motivation is, or what we've been taught and told a woman's motivation is on film. I'm not going to assume I know what a woman's motivation is, but what we've seen on film, and this film upends everything. It does not allow you to believe anything because it's nothing like you've seen or felt for me before. And it could be very much a turnoff. And I use that purposefully because not necessarily a sexual turnoff, but like an emotional turnoff, that I'm not being fed what I'm used to. That my DNA was told this is what I'm supposed to expect from a mother on film. But I feel proud that my DNA is at least willing to understand that maybe I don't know what this motivation of a woman who's had kids, what their motivation might be. Let me just take a split second to just listen instead of assume I know. And now that's leads to a lot of frustration because now I want to know, or tell me why this is art, but I felt the feelings and I rode the ride and I know I felt stuff. Whether or not I could define it, whether or not I could tell you what I think it was meant to be versus what I got from it is two entirely different conversations, but I know what I felt. And I think I could sit in a room with these people who made this film and let them talk about it and at least know I understood. And speaking of which, Olivia Coleman has taken every award you could possibly imagine and she's riding it. And this year is no different. And I would not be surprised if she wins her second Oscar for this. And the best part about it is that she has to take back her first speech. Because when she won for The Favorite, she says, I hope my kids are watching. Oh, if they're not, good for you, but this isn't going to happen again. And just because it might happen again, and she is a front runner. She's been going back and forth with people. It's been a very interesting race this year. And people have been coming up and going back and coming up and going back. And then Kristen Stewart didn't get a SAG nomination. Everybody freaked out about that. Regina King didn't either. Now, Regina King won the Golden Globe. So, and remember we talked about how Regina King didn't get a SAG nomination. How is she going to win Best Supporting Actress? And I said, she is. And she did. So if Olivia Coleman does win, it'll be great because just all of those people who will see it just because she won an Oscar for it, and all those people are going to be perplexed by it and not really understand it, but feel all the feelings. That to me is the price of admission right there. And I can't wait for Dakota Johnson to be in that position. It's not going to happen with this movie. It might happen for Jessie Buckley because, like I said, she just does opposite and different things than you're expecting a character to do, and that's the actress's choice. And it might be on the page. I hope that we get Jane Campion, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Rebecca Ferguson for Passing. I hope they all are nominated for screenplays.
Rebecca Hall.
Rebecca Hall. What did I say? Ferguson? Rebecca Hall. Yes, I got so excited. I remembered that it was a Rebecca, and I love Rebecca Hall. Sorry for Passing. And these people are being nominated for all these awards, the actresses of all these films. So it would be a nice year for the women to finally take over, and deservedly so. It's not like they need to trump it up just because it's a bunch of women. Everybody want to be diverse. It's not that. The stuff is on the screen.
Well, you definitely have your ear to the ground on that stuff a lot more than I do. But the good thing is that these filmmakers are getting the resources to be able to put what makes them interested out to us, and allows us to determine whether we're interested in it or not. You know, nobody's shoving anything down anybody's throats. It's just these are available for people to seek out.
It is one of the most interesting films I've seen this year, and that alone deserves recognition. Now, I don't understand the industry. I don't understand how people look at things in the industry. I don't really care a whole lot about that, but I know there's a difference between what we see and what the industry is looking at stuff. And it's a publicity thing for most people, and it's to promote things. But wouldn't it be great if Maggie Gyllenhaal was recognized like that? Because then that filters through, and you're right. It gives them opportunities and people give them money. Because that's what we were saying about the director of Mass. I'm not sure if it's Fran or Fran Kranz. I'm not sure if it's Fran Kranz or not. I need to figure that out.
Shouldn't
anyway,
be Fran Kranz.
Fran Kranz. Yes, but I don't want to say that disrespectfully, but every time I think of it as Fran, I do hear it like that. So I don't want to say it and sound like I have a bad accent. Anyway, the reason why the focus is on that film is not only it's a well-crafted movie, but somebody's going to give him money for his next picture. And that to me is the important thing. So if Maggie Gyllenhaal takes a Best Director, a Best Picture, a Best Screenplay nomination, then the next time she walks into the room somewhere, nobody has to be explained why we need to give Maggie Gyllenhaal money. This is why, because she's made one of the most interesting films of the year, hands down.
All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. You can also find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast, and we'll see you next time.